And welcome to College Football Now, our weekly look at college football in the state and across the country. With me, as always, our national college football writer, Matt Murschel. I'm Brant Parsons, and this episode is brought to you by Purple Rain, the new Orlando Sentinel book that is coming out that chronicles Orlando City's first Major League Soccer season. 160 pages of pictures and stories from the year. And if you order it now, you get $10 off the cover price. Go to orlandosentinel.com/Purple Rain to reserve your copy. Tell them Matt and Brant sent you.
This isn't about Prince?
No, it's about real football.
Oh, sorry.
Orlando City.
Oh, okay.
We're not going to get into that argument. We're going to talk a lot of coaches today, and really just to start off, just our thoughts and condolences to Jerry Kill. Just an awful story this morning. The Minnesota head coach having to step down due to issues with his health through epilepsy and seizures. And breaking news this morning was that he was stepping down. And there's all these different, you know how much it meant to him to coach these guys and to see him have to give it up because of health reasons and how serious of a health concern it was. It's tough to. Well,
I think sometimes, we kind of gloss over or forget the fact that, these people are human beings and they have families and they have their lives. And, when something like this happens where it's something you've done for 30-odd years like he has, and, all when you wake up every morning is coaching. And then, you take it to the point where you're only sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night, and that starts affecting your health. And he has a serious issue. And he had a couple seizures this week, he said. And, he sounded like, really felt like it wasn't in a situation where he felt he could go forward. Because he felt like if he did, then he was putting his health at risk, and that he would probably, could end up, killing him possibly. So I think he made the right move. I think you step aside, and I think eventually he'll find his way back into, I mean, as a head coach at any point, but maybe he can find his way back as a consultant or something where you don't have to be so involved over and over again. We saw a similar situation, in a smaller frame with Urban Meyer, years ago back in Florida, where his health issue kind of forced him to kind of step away from the game for a while.
Yeah, agree, treating them like humans is important. Now we're going to go and treat them like pieces of meat the rest of the show. 2 coaching changes within the state this week, and normally when we open the show, we talk about the games from the week before, and really when you look at Clemson 58, Miami nothing, and Houston 59, UCF 10, there's not much to say about those games. They kind of tell the story. Of course, the story ended up being coaching changes, one a resignation to retire, the other a firing. We're going to start local. We'll start with UCF. George O'Leary on Sunday announced that he is retiring from his job at UCF, effective immediately. Danny Barrett, the quarterback coach, takes over in the role for the rest of the season. UCF started out the year 0-8. It's almost just comical or ironic or whatever to think back 2 weeks ago. George O'Leary was the AD, interim AD, and the head coach. Now he's retired. Let's talk. I mean, this is something. It shocked me. I thought that he would be stepping down. I didn't know he would step down immediate or announce plans. But what is it? Where is this program now? What does this mean for UCF with George O'Leary stepping down, taking retirement? But before we start looking at who's going to replace him, let's just look back at O'Leary and what this move meant.
Well, I think, it's similar to me. It reminded me a little bit of what happened with Steve Spurrier a couple weeks ago. You look at the guy who says, basically I feel like I'm in the way. And I don't know if O'Leary felt he was in the way of this program, but I think, when you look at it, maybe he just felt it was time. Maybe he felt, it's time to move forward. Who knows what his reasoning is? He hasn't really kind of come out and said what exactly was the deal. But, coaches go through this sometimes when programs are struggling. You have young kids, you've got 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Sometimes they're not used to losing. They don't know what to do with it. And maybe, they're not willing, they're confused, and you kind of lose their focus when it comes to what happened this season. And maybe a little bit of that happened. And, from what we're hearing, and, that maybe George thought about making this move beforehand, maybe thought about this was going to be his last year. I think that's something that was definitely probably brought up a couple times. And they just felt like maybe it was time to move on. Also, it gives you an opportunity with Danny Barrett maybe to get a couple games in, give him some coaching experience, see what it's like, maybe help him out down the road, whether he's going to remain here at UCF or probably more likely go somewhere else. So there's some situations. And then it also goes back to recruiting. It's the same thing that happened with Spurrier, where Spurrier left because he felt like this was hurting the recruiting chances of his school. In UCF's case, their recruiting class in this next upcoming years is really bad. I think he felt like, obviously some of the issues with O'Leary's future kind of impacted that. So maybe stepping aside and giving some other people a chance will kind of help that situation moving forward.
Barrett takes over the team. We'll talk more about their game coming up against Cincinnati later in the program. He is the quarterback's coach. He is the reason Justin Holman is there. Justin Holman has not worked up to his potential at this point, so I think Barrett would have to have just a phenomenal Final Four games to be considered for this job, but he does have the shot to impress. He gets to coach him for 4 games. Lots of names out there, some maybe more hopeful, some more realistic. Just some of the names that I took from your post this week, potential candidates for this job, and I want to get your kind of opinion on where do you think UCF's going to go with this. Jeff Brom, coach at Western Kentucky, who I think would be a great hire no matter who gets him. I see him possibly going bigger just the things he's been able to do there. Kirby Smart, the Bama defense coordinator. Jeff Collins, the Florida defense coordinator. DJ Durkin, a former Florida defense coordinator, now Michigan defensive coordinator. Mario Cristobal, if he doesn't go to Miami, is an option. He's the Bama O-line coach. And then just a couple other names. Doc Holliday at Marshall, PJ Fleck at Western Michigan, and then even more names. Billy Gonzalez, the offense coordinator at Mississippi State. Rick Stockstill at Middle Tennessee. He's the head coach there. Lots of names there, lots of different names. People I've talked to, people you've talked to, though, kind of the agreement is UCF needs to almost go opposite O'Leary and go young and go energetic and kind of get a coach who embraces the things that maybe George didn't in the coaching role.
Well, and I think mainly it's you want to look at this job is some coaches would look at this opportunity as a destination job where you come here, you're going to coach maybe the last 10 years of your career, and then you're going to retire because it is Central Florida. George, for instance, example. But other times, it's the idea of bringing in a young coach, bring in maybe either a former coordinator or someone maybe who's got a little bit of coaching experience who comes in and treats this job as like, listen, I can take this program for the next 10 years, maybe get them to a higher level, and then maybe use this as a stepping stone to get to another job. I know UCF fans don't like to hear that word, stepping stone, but it's those 2 words. But I think you have to look at it this way with this program, that's probably what it's going to be. This is an attractive program. There's a lot of opportunity here to come in here. And it's not like, despite the 0-8 record, it's not like this program is going to take 4 or 5 years to rebuild. I think the crucial factor is getting someone who can recruit. And I think, as much as that UCF has done a good job in the last couple of years, I think right now they've got to ramp up that recruiting. They've got to get kids. You are in Central Florida. You are surrounded by 50 miles a radius of that campus. You've got so much talent here. And I don't necessarily know if they've done a good job of keeping some of those kids around here. We're seeing guys, we talked about Paxton Lynch, who went off to Memphis, is now be considered a possible Heisman candidate. Brandon Doty, we're talking about Western Kentucky with Jeff Brom. He was a Florida guy. He wasn't recruited highly at all and left to go there. So I think it's finding someone who can either recruit or someone who can bring in somebody who's going to be a good recruiter is going to help this program as well. So, and I think, UCF fans, obviously I've heard from them all this week, they want an offensive-minded guy. They want Oregon's offense fit into this program. They want to be able to score 60, 70 points a game. I don't necessarily think that's what you're looking for. I think you're looking for a guy who's going to take this program to the next level. You've already gotten to the point where you won a Fiesta Bowl. Now the next step is, continually winning 9, 10, 11 games a year and then winning an American championship, and then maybe possibly hoping that maybe the conference goes to a Power 5 at some point.
You mentioned Paxton Lynch, an interesting story. Deltona Trinity Christian quarterback. One offer in state in the days leading up to National Signing Day, Florida Tech. That was the only that was the only state school that offered him. In the days right beforehand, some teams came calling, but he was like, he would have gone to Florida Tech before he would have gone anywhere else, just because they offered him. And then, of course, he gets the offer from Memphis, and the story is written now.
Well, the Paxton Lynch story is funny. Is Florida offered him twice. They were.
Well, he would have been in Florida if not for the
coaching
changes.
But after the coaching changes, the coaching changes really changed that. And imagine a Paxton Lynch now playing, here with Jim McElwain's offense. I mean, it's
it might still be
Will
Muscham's offense.
But so you can always play that game. But again, these what happens. So. Either way, I think if you bring someone in, we're seeing programs like Houston with Tom Herman we saw this weekend. A guy who's really energized that program, comes from the Urban Meyer coaching tree a little bit, was able to do that. You need someone like that. We talk about some of those names. PJ Fleck, for instance, at Western Michigan is a high-octane energy guy, really gets the fan base going, has got a lot of support from the boosters. That school program now is in the middle of trying to upgrade its facilities because of it. You need someone like that who's really going to come in. The facilities are there. You really don't need to do that much upgrading. It's just getting the fan base, everyone up. You need to get fans in the seats. That's an important thing.
I think some of the keys for the UCF job are you need to bring in a younger guy, which we've already talked about. But I think UCF needs to pony up for assistant coaches and the staff, because if you know anything about recruiting, it's not always the head coach that does the brunt of the work. They're the closer. But you need guys on your staff that can go into South Florida and bring in the top recruits. You need guys that know the high school coaches across the state and all the big programs that have your connections there. And if you don't pay your assistants on the UCF doesn't pay their assistants nearly the level even of American schools. So if I'm a coach coming in, the thing I'm going to ask for, make sure my assistants are getting paid also, so I can bring in quality assistants. Because if you look at the job being done at the schools that it works, there's always a recruiting guy or two or three in some cases that is the assistant coach on the staff, and that's where it all starts. You can have a great head coach, but you need the guys to do the brunt work to get the kids in there.
And I would argue that's the most important job on the staff. I mean, head coach is important, don't get me wrong, but I think the recruiting coordinator or the guys that are really responsible for recruiting can be look at Florida's situation. Look what they've been able to do so far with Jim McElwain.
And what's one of the first hires he did? Randy Shannon.
Brings in Randy Shannon,
who has the Miami connections.
Yes.
And you saw they salvaged
yes.
a dirt poor recruiting class in a record amount of time before national signing day.
And Florida State, for instance, Florida State's done that last couple of years. Jimbo Fisher's, goes out and gets a guy like Tim Brewster, who you bring in, and he's a really good, excellent recruiter, one of the top in the country. Kirby Smart recruits really well from Alabama. It's no secret that Nick Saban hires guys who can recruit. Lane Kiffin's out there recruiting. You get these guys in there, and when you get these assistant coaches to do that, they take a lot of the work to help you out, and then you can mention, then you're a closer. You come in and kind of seal the deal. So that's what's going to be important. I think UCF, there's no excuse why UCF can't have a handful or two. I mean, there should be opportunities to have some of these kids here in Willow.
Well, there are now 8 head coaching jobs open, and another one we're going to talk about right now. Down in Coral Gables, Miami fires head coach Al Golden after a 58-0 loss to Clemson. Assistant coach Larry Scott will take over for the rest of the season. Al Golden talked to the brass heading into this year, felt that he needed this year was going to be the leap. There was a lot of talk that they were probably looking to replace him last year. I think Miami may have felt a little bit guilty for not telling him the whole deal when they hired him, and maybe that's why they gave him another year. Al Golden, if you don't know the story, came into Miami under some tough circumstances that he didn't even know about when he was taking the job, may not have taken the job with the whole Nevin Shapiro and all of those things going on. But Al Golden, some good recruiting classes, did some things in this program that I think will look favorably on him in the long term, cleaned up the program, did some of the right things in the program, but then you look at where they are, they're still not where Miami fans think they should be, and obviously the loss to Clemson was the final straw in this. Al Golden, you can go a couple different ways on this Miami job, and every national recruiting person will tell you, or a national guy will say, it's all about the stadium and the facilities and all that. There's a part in that, but I've talked to recruiting guys in the state, and they say it's more Al Golden didn't do a good job of keeping guys interested in the job and bringing them in here. If you commit to Miami, you still need to coddle them and make sure to come in here. And there's some questions about whether or not Al Golden did that. But this is a job, much like UCF, there's ups, there's pluses and minuses on this. But Al Golden wasn't able to bring Miami back to the prominence that Miami fans feel, the ones that go to games, the tens of them. Former players felt that Miami should be, and that's why he's out.
Well, I don't think, to be honest with you, I think he was going to be out the
no
first
matter
day
right.
he took the job. I mean, that's what amazes me about this situation, is because I know people didn't like Al Golden, but let's be honest. He comes into a situation, he leaves Temple, a program that he was building up, goes to Miami. Right as soon as he gets there, the NCAA hammers them, gets them under investigation. He spends 2 or 3 years under a cloud of an NCAA investigation. He still has to recruit, still has to try to do what needs to be done.
Misses the bowl
game because they take the bowl ban. Still manages to win games, not 6-7 games, but does it, and then loses scholarships, loses all this stuff, and then comes out of the bowl game, comes out of that situation, and fans are upset because they're not competing for the college football playoff. And I don't necessarily think that was going to happen. I mean, so when now you look at Al Golden, all he was a bridge. He was a bridge to whoever the next coach is going to be. And I think he was under not just the expectations, but I also feel like it was unfair for him to receive the criticism from the former players on Twitter and social media. Yeah. I mean, because again, he's out there trying to do the best he can. Again, this isn't a guy who went out as far as you know, and was breaking rules and was, abusing players and doing all. This is a guy who tried to keep the program clean, tried to keep the program moving forward, and just didn't come down to wins and losses. And the fact that people didn't like him really just felt, which is unusual. So I think this job, when we talk about some of these jobs, this job to me is not anywhere near high up as it used to be. This job is far low because of some of the things we just mentioned.
Well, it's almost shameful, some of the former players, the way they come out and attack the coach, and the use of social media by some of them, Warren Sapp being one that sticks out, and other guys that aren't around the program, but feel they have a say in who should be coached. But even just that, I mean, now you're hearing that these former players are all going to come together at some sort of have a conference and talk about coach. That's not what you want. And that goes back to it goes back to the president, it goes back to the athletic director, it goes back to athletic leadership. If you want to take command, show you have power. Don't let these people come in and push you around. Yes, they give money and they're alumni and you don't want to lose them. But at some point, you got to say, we're going to pick our head coach. I'm going to make the decision. You're not making the decision. And whoever I pick, you're going to either be happy with or you can go somewhere else. And you may just have to do that. If you don't want to support the program, then move forward. Now, before we get into potential replacements, I want to talk about just the state, and you hinted upon it, the state of the Miami program. They play in an NFL stadium that is very noticeable when it's not full, and it's never full. It's an hour from campus. It is a small private university. It does not have money coming into it like schools like Florida and Alabama and Florida State do. It has a tradition. It has the 80s and the late 90s to hang their head on, and it's a good tradition to have. There's some dominant teams. But this is not it doesn't have any of the traditional football things that these schools that they're competing against recruiting-wise have on that top level. Yeah, they have good mid-tier ACC facilities. They have a new weight room, and they fix up the dorms. There's no indoor facility. Again, the stadium is a huge eyesore on that. The fan base is small and fickle. This isn't Miami. Miami fans especially think, oh, Miami, everybody's going to want to come coach here. That's not necessarily the case. Southern Cal is obviously a better job. South Carolina, thanks to Steve Spurrier, is a better job in the SEC East. I think it has a lot more potential in that. You could even argue the Minnesota job. It could be something more intriguing to a coach. Miami is not where Miami fans think it is.
No, they really aren't. And again, sometimes it's just because you hang on to history. You hang on to the fact that this is what we used to be, and we were there and we got there so quickly. How come we're not there right now? And I think it's because college football has changed. I think honestly the landscape has changed so much. Things have gotten different. You see the amount of money that schools are paying for head coaches. I mean, $7 million for a head coach. Miami's not going to pay that kind of money for a head coach. And if you want to get a Chip Kelly, I love that name when Chip Kelly's name comes up. Yeah. Then some of these players need to shut up and start passing the hat around, because that's what it's going to take to get a guy like that. And the school's not going to do that. You mentioned it. They have problems. They're already going to be in the hawk for probably close to $10 million for this firing, because Al Golden's contract was huge. You're going to have to pay off, more than likely get rid of all the current coaching staff. Now you're going to have to bring in another coach and then hire another coaching staff. So, again, there's a lot of money being invested in this. And to get that kind of guy to come in and do that, you almost need a young guy, as we talked about with UCF, but you need someone who's a rah-rah, who could go out and convince the fans. And I know you can recruit Miami, and there's tons of talent there, but you need to go out and recruit the fans. You need to say, you know what, no excuses. You need to fill the stadium. You need to come out every week, and you need to do this. I'm tired of hearing about the stadium. We don't have a stadium. Come out, come to these games, get the students to come to these games. Tell these former players, quit sitting on the couch on your cell phone and come out and sit in these games, because that's how you get people to show, and that's how we get programs start to make changes and start to get for the better.
I grew up in Miami. I grew up going to Miami Hurricane games at the Orange Bowl. Miami fans are terrible. I mean, you need to win. I mean, but that's a whole other issue there. But what I've been telling people, and I have a lot of Miami friends because of growing up there, Miami is going to need to go out and get a guy that you probably don't know his name or you know very little of, because they're going to need to get a guy who wants to come in and prove himself and be able to afford him. So, like, you think about what Florida did with Jim McElwain. Even Jim McElwain couldn't have gone to Miami, because look at what Florida paid to get him, to buy him out of his contract at Colorado State. So you're going to look at an up-and-coming coordinator, an up-and-coming head coach at a small school willing to take a chance. You're not going to have the opportunity to pick and choose who you want. You're not Texas. You're not Alabama. you're not even Southern Cal. So having said that, some of the names that are bantering around for the Miami job, and the first one, I think it just makes me laugh. Butch Davis. He's let it known that he wants to coach Miami again.
I don't understand the idea. No offense to Butch Davis, but I don't understand the fascination with retreads.
Well, they were successful under him.
Successful, and
they
that's
think
fine.
they can he'll come in and just make them that way again.
Jimmy Johnson. Let's throw out, if you're going to start throwing out names, just throw out names of guys who
Schnellenberger.
Schnellenberger. I mean, at this point, why? I mean, why would you go that direction? I don't think that's a very good. Yeah.
But guys that I think, and then there's some names that are floating around: Rich Rodriguez, Lane Kiffin, Dana Holgerson. Those are all names to me don't fit this because there's a chance, but those are pretty big names.
But I will say that, and part of that goes back to is you don't need an ego.
Yes.
You need someone whose job is coming. I'm not saying these guys are egomaniacs. I'm just saying is you don't need a personality. You need someone who comes in and puts the program up above the person, above themselves. You don't need someone who comes in and, we hired Lane Kiffin, now it's, the Lane Kiffin show. You need it to be about the Miami Hurricanes show, and then the coach needs to be the secondary thought. That's why I agree with you. I think it's going to have to be a young guy. It's going to have to be a guy who really doesn't have that kind of, swagger yet. A name that hasn't been mentioned that I'll throw out, I think PJ Fleck would be outstanding here. I know he's a Midwestern guy. I know he's an Illinois guy. He's probably more than likely will get the job at Illinois or Minnesota. I think for a guy who's a raw, high energy, high octane, goes out to the crowds and gets the people, that's what you need. You need someone who's all about that, getting the players to buy in and all that, because I think that's what this program needs. It doesn't need a Lane Kiffin. It doesn't need a Greg Schiano. It doesn't need a Tommy Tuberville. It needs someone who could start fresh.
A couple of names that are out there that I think are intriguing, but they're in the NFL. Rob Chizzinski is one that's been mentioned. He's got Miami ties. He's been in the NFL, though, so long. An accomplished coach in the NFL. You worry about his ties still to the high school because it's so important to have ties to South Florida. He has them by playing there, but he's been in the NFL so long. A name no one's mentioning, Winston Moss, assistant head coach and linebackers at Green Bay Packers, has some Miami ties. But I think the answer, and Miami fans are going to just throw stuff at us for saying this, but I think the answer is so cut and dry on this, and it has to be Mario Cristobal. He is a Miami guy. He's played in Miami. He's coached in Miami at FIU. Turned that program from a cellar dweller, got him to 2 bowl games in 6 years. He's coaching under Nick Saban. He's learning a few things up there. Excellent recruiter, and I think he's a guy that would take this job. And you laugh about that about Miami, but you need it. It's not just finding a guy you want. You need a guy that wants to come and coach in Miami, and I think he is the guy that should coach us. And I know Miami fans aren't going to like that, but I think he's the one.
But I think the problem is, it's not just mine. I think fans in general, you always want that big name hire. You want splash hire. It doesn't matter what's going on in your program. You want a guy you want the Nick Saban, or you want the hire that's going to draw everyone right. That's why Chip Kelly's name has been out there all the time, and I don't think it's going to be a factor in any of these jobs because you just want that big splash hire, But I think you have to look at this in the big picture, which is what best fits our school, what fits our program, what about academics. No one talks about, UCF, for instance, is a great example. UCF is one of the best when it comes to academics. So whoever you bring in has to be able to make sure academics are still a concern, or still something they deal with. You don't want no trouble. You don't want kids getting in trouble. You need to find a coach like that. Those are the factors, not whether this guy is going to be splashy of a hire. You need a guy to make sure he can do all these things when he gets here.
And just finally, which job do you think is better? David Whitley, our colleague, wrote something us. Mike Bianchi's talked about it in his radio show. UCF or Miami. Which one do you think is the better job out of these two?
I think the better job right now is UCF. And I know, again, Miami fans will be at, but I'm just thinking right now, you look at the stadium, facilities, all that, I think UCF has that at this point right now. And I think UCF is a lot closer to being right there winning games than maybe Miami is. I know the ACC Coastal is up and on. You got Duke and Pittsburgh and North Carolina. So there's chances are you're going to be right back there again. But I think when you look at the fan base, when you look at what's going on, I think your better chance is UCF at this point.
I think UCF has the higher ceiling. I think you could do more at UCF. They're not Power 5. You still have the money issues. UCF cheering hard for Memphis, Temple, or Houston to get into the New Year's Six Bowl. But I think the ceiling is higher at UCF. Oh, by the way, there was another football game over the weekend that we need to talk about just real quickly, and it was the the craziest play of the weekend, Florida State losing to Georgia Tech on a special teams play. They lose 22-16. Roberto Aguayo's 56-yard field goal on the last play, blocked and then returned 78 yards by Lance Austin for a touchdown for Georgia Tech. That's the play that gets all the highlights in this game, but Florida State struggled throughout. There were a lot of plays in this game that cost them. 4 times in the red zone, just 1 touchdown, 2 field goals in the red zone, and then, of course, the first turnover of the year, an Everett Golson interception in the fourth quarter. Only 70 yards rushing for Florida State in this game against a bad run defense of Georgia Tech. Dalvin Cook, 17 carries, 82 yards, and he only touched the ball 4 times in the second half. Georgia Tech has a way of messing up your offense with that offense they have staying on the field. We don't have a lot of time to spend on Florida State because we've spent so much time on UCF and Miami, but it's a shocking loss because Georgia Tech came in with 5 straight losses. The teams they lost to were good, but it's a reminder, Florida State, this is a rebuilding year. As much as it's a rebuilding year with a lot of talent, but this is a team that's going to have a couple of these tough games, and this was one they didn't execute when they needed to, and of course the fluke play loses it for them.
Well, and now you look at it, I don't see Florida State making it into the college football playoff. I didn't think going into this year that they were a team good enough to make it into the playoff, but now you look at it with that 1 loss, I don't think that happening. I know people say to me, well, if we beat Clemson, we're going to be right there. No, I don't think so. I think if you beat Clemson, I think the ACC...
You beat Clemson, the ACC's gone.
The ACC's gone. I mean, the ACC is that weak. I mean, you look at the Coastal. So even if Florida State beats Clemson next week and then somehow manages to go to the championship game, you're looking at Pittsburgh, which is ranked 25th. You're looking at maybe Duke, which will be around 22 or 21. North Carolina's in there, but Pittsburgh and North Carolina play each other.
Well, they all play each other.
Yeah, they all play each other. So eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have a low-ranked in the 20s type team possibly in that game. That's not going to be enough to push you up. So I think Florida State's done. I think their best chance now is to kind of finish out and play strong, try to upset Clemson, try to be the spoiler when it comes to this. I mean, again, we talked about rebuilding. We talked about losing a guy like Jameis Winston. They took the gamble with Everett Golson. I think it's paid off. But I think losing a game like this really kind of makes you wonder, was it worth it, for 1 year to have Everett Golson and not get to the college football playoff?
Across the country, the biggest story came in the Baylor game. Quarterback Seth Russell out for the season, and neck surgery after suffering damage to his cervical vertebra, an injury late in the game that they were blowing him out. Seth Russell was having a fantastic season. We talked about him last week as a Heisman candidate. True freshman Jarrett Stidham will take over for a stretch of games that is at K-State, Oklahoma, at Oklahoma State, and TCU, the 4 hardest games on Baylor's schedule. And you're going to have a true freshman come in there. But he's played in every fourth quarter so far this season.
The nice thing is that with Baylor is they've been up big so much.
They've been up big.
That he gets a chance to play.
He's played in every game. His numbers, 24-28, 331 yards, 6 TDs, no INTs. You're going to have a drop in this. Maybe not as big a drop as you think. Art Briles is a big believer in his quarterback. But, of course, with Baylor, this all will come down to Shock Linwood, the running back. They've got a trio of running backs there, but Linwood's averaging 8.1 yards a carry. He's got 500-yard games, 221 yards rushing against Texas Tech. You also have Terrence Williams, Johnny Jefferson. Baylor's offense has thrived by running the ball. Seth Russell's been part of that running the ball, but that's still going to be the key. But, man, those 4 games to come in as a freshman, you sure would like to have some of those easy games early on.
That would have been nice. I think at least I look at it this way. This is going to be interesting to look at Baylor because there's always been that debate: is Art Briles producing great quarterbacks, or is it that that the system produces these great quarterbacks with big numbers? So I think it'll be interesting to see how Stidham works. He comes in there and gets that system. I think they'll have a little bit of a game, here and there, to kind of have an opportunity to win. This is a big blow because I feel like Baylor, of the two, Baylor and TCU, Baylor was the better team. I think TCU's defense gives up way too many big plays, way too many yards. So I felt like Baylor had the better opportunity because their defense was a little bit better. Now comes the question mark, moving forward, how does this team change? Maybe Stidham's not as good of a rusher as Russell is, and it looks like. Maybe he's going to throw the ball more. I think that's when your wide receivers really play big come up big. And we've seen that with Corey Coleman. Guy's a Heisman-type candidate right now. I agree with you. I think the running game is going to be crucial, at least early on, to kind of give him some opportunities. But this offensive line is solid. They are one of the best offensive lines in the country. I think that'll help him out as well. So if he gets time, I think he'll find some guys. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get through this next week or two, and then they get in that tough schedule. That'll be where you really see. And don't forget, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is supposed to consider injuries when it comes to putting in rankings. So they're going to look at Baylor's situation and say, okay, you lost your starting quarterback after week 8. We may consider that when it comes to where they place them in the rankings.
Yeah, and Baylor gets a benefit of a bye week this week, but the Big 12, they scheduled like champs because November is going to be crazy.
They did that on purpose.
They did it on purpose.
They did it on purpose because they wanted
Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, all undefeated on the season. Oklahoma has one loss to Texas.
Yeah.
They're all going to play each other in
Baylor
November.
and TCU played in the last.
They played an extra last week.
So what's going to happen is
weekend.
those guys are going to be, one of those guys is going to be gone, and they're not going to be able to come back, I don't think, strong enough to be back.
12 undefeated teams heading into the weekend. That's the most ever this late in the season. They have 12 still undefeated.
3 of those from the American.
3 in American, 3 in the Big 12, 3 in the Big 10. ACC has one, the MACtion has one, and SEC has one, LSU. So we could end up with 6 undefeated teams at the most. That's the most we can have of those 12. But 12 teams this late in the season, still undefeated.
And what's amazing,
and a lot of good one-loss teams, too.
A lot of good one-loss teams. And think about this. Pac-12 now, Utah's lost last week. No undefeated teams in the Pac-12. So that's going to be a factor. We saw Ohio State get into the Final Four with 1 loss. But this really increases the chances that we could see a 1-loss, maybe even 2 1-loss teams get into the Final Four.
It'll be interesting in the playoffs. The first playoff announcement comes out next week. It'd be interesting as this goes on to see these really good one-loss teams like Alabama, Notre Dame, Stanford, how they compare to the undefeated teams like in Iowa, like in Oklahoma State. If they keep winning, how will the committee look at them compared to the one-loss teams?
And I'm going to throw this out here, and I know it's not a stretch, but I have a funny feeling this first college football playoff rankings is you're going to be surprised. I think I wouldn't be shocked if the top 4 don't look anything like the top 4 we're seeing in these polls right now. You may see a team that we don't even think is going to be right there, just because they look at their different parameters and what they're going to put in there.
All right, before we get to the national picks, it's time to look at the Heisman watch for this week. And your pick is Stanford running back Christian McCaffrey. He leads the nation with 259.7. .7 is key there. All-purpose yards per game, and he is really Mr. Everything for the Cardinal.
Yeah, I mean, unlike what we've seen earlier on this year with the running backs, with the Leonard Fournettes, the Dalvin Cooks, Ezekiel Elliott's, McCaffrey's a guy who really does it all. Returns kicks. He's a kind of an all-purpose type guy. I think that could help his case, especially if Stanford continues to win games, and they're going to play some tough opponents. You talk about Oregon. You talk about the Pac-12 South, and we look at some of those games as well. I think if he continues to have big performances in those kind of situations, especially returning kicks and rushing the ball and everything, I think he's got a good shot to make a big push because, again, what will happen is voters will look at the idea that you do a lot more than just hand the ball off to you or touch the ball 20 or 25 times a game. If you're touching the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game, I think it's going to help out.
We'll talk more Stanford as we get into our national picks. First, though, another reminder, this episode brought to you by Purple Rain. It's the new Orlando Sentinel book on Orlando City's first year in Major League Soccer. I know for a fact it was just signed off for in the last couple hours as the season ended this past week. The book is going to print. 160 pages of stories and photographs, recaps the first season in Orlando for Orlando City, our first city in Major League Soccer for Orlando City. Order your copy today. There's a $10 discount off the cover price. Go to orlandosentinel.com/purplerain to reserve your copy. National games we will start with, and again this week only one game involving 2 top 25 teams. We'll get to that one at the end of our national games. That, of course, is taking place in Philadelphia. Let's start Thursday night. West Virginia visits number 5 TCU. This game at 7:30 on Fox Sports 1. They've met 3 times in the conference. The games have been decided by a total of 5 combined points. The Horned Frogs, we've talked about it more than once on the show. They have been struggling with injuries. They've had 20 different starters on defense. They have true freshmen playing on defense. West Virginia, on the other hand, they've turned the ball over 10 times just in the month of October. And you talk about Big 12 scheduling. West Virginia has played all of the big dogs in October. and they've struggled in those games. They're 0-3 in the Big 12. This is their last one against those Big Four in the conference. TCU has won 15 straight games. It's the second most in the country behind The Ohio State University. And this is my fun fact for this one. The Horned Frogs, they have a 21-game win streak when they are ranked in the top 5 of the AP poll. That's pretty impressive. This is a game TCU has been just squeaking by, and now they do get this game at home, but they get a West Virginia team that is better than their record. These two teams match up well. I think this one's going to be another barn burner, just like the other three matchups. I think this is going to be a close one.
Well, actually, I don't. I mean, I'm going to go take
you don't
the
have
flip
to.
side.
That's why we
I'm
do
going to
this.
take the flip side out. And the reason I say that is because West Virginia's last game was against Baylor. They gave up 63 points and over 600 yards of total offense to the Bears. So I think TCU is going to struggle maybe early on. I mean, that's the problem they seem to have. But I think West Virginia's defense has just been battered and bruised. I think obviously losing one of their top safeties in Carl Joseph, I think that was a huge impact on them as well. So I'd like TCU to win this game. I think they'll probably win by double digits. As you mentioned, it's just unfortunate scheduling for West Virginia. I mean, they've really kind of hit the peak of the Big 12, when you talk about the Big Four, and I think it's really taken their toll on them. And I think this is a game, though, that, again, a good solid performance could do a lot to kind of showcase maybe some of the weaknesses that TCU has.
West Virginia, they're winning this game. It's going to be start of upset crazy weekend. Well, maybe not that, but West Virginia will start off the weekend for us with a win at TCU. Number 3, Clemson. They fired a coach last week. What can they do this week? They're heading to NC State. They play there Saturday at 3:30. They won last year's meeting 41-0. This is the Textile Bowl. A quote from Dabo Swinney this week that I really liked, and they talk about his rankings right now and what he tells the team. He says, I showed them the poll from this time last year. Mississippi State was number 1. Ohio State wasn't in the top 10. He's factually correct on that. This is a Clemson team that is, I think they're for real. And this will be one of those tests. You come off a big win at Miami. You go on the road against their ACC nemesis, the Wolfpack. A big game for Clemson. My fun fact in this one, 2 of them. Clemson 13-7 all-time on Halloween. And their mascot, Jonathan Mace, set a school record for most road push-ups when he did 301 push-ups after scores in that win over Miami on Saturday.
He's got big biceps.
I don't know if we could do 301 push-ups in the month of October if you added them all up.
Anyway.
3.1 push-ups, maybe. But this I think we're both picking Clemson, but this is one of those games. It's a week before Florida State. It's a week after Miami. It lingers itself to possibly be a bit of a trap game there.
Yeah, you open up the dictionary and look at a trap game, and this is it right here. Because, again, Clemson, I'm sure Dabo Swinney's telling his players not to focus on all the talk about Florida State, but it's awful hard not to do because this is the game that everyone has circled on his calendar and said that's the game that's really going to kind of decide, the ACC, so to speak. So I think going on the road, I think, again, you're playing an NC State team that's played, relatively well. They're 5-2, but those 5 wins haven't been anything really majorly impressive when you think about it. I think Jacoby Brissett for NC State's had a really great start. Only has 1 interception. So I think, again, if he can stay healthy and he can say, not turn the ball over in this game, I think they might have a shot early on. I know Clemson is playing really good football, but I think Clemson wins this game. I think defensively this team is getting better and better every week. Brent Venables has done an amazing job with the Tigers right now, and I think that's the scary part about it going into next week's game.
We knew what they could do on offense, and now that defense seems to be clicking. The only thing to watch for NC State to have a chance is Jacoby Brissett, and he's still in the top 20 in the country in completion percentage, but he's down to 17 after leading it for a couple weeks because he started off so strong. I picked Clemson in this game. It may take them a couple quarters to get going because they'll be looking ahead, but in the end, Clemson knocks off NC State. Number 8, Stanford visits the suddenly hot Washington State. Cougars. They play Saturday night at 10:30. Stanford, the lone unbeaten team left in Pac-12 conference play. We talked about Christian McCaffrey. He surpassed 200 combined rushing receiving yards in 3 of the last 4 games. Luke Falk. It's a name most people have not heard. He threw for 514 yards and 5 touchdowns against Arizona. He has thrown for over 500 yards twice this year. Washington State, the gunslingers up there, this will be their test. They get Stanford at home. Cardinal have won 7 straight in the series. Kevin Hogan's been playing pretty well for Stanford also. He leads the Pac-12 in passing efficiency. this is might meets might. Stanford's defense against that crazy Washington State passing offense, which they'll score some points, but I think we're both kind of Stanford believers at this point.
Yeah, I think Stanford's probably the best team in the Pac-12 right now, looking forward. I mean, I think Washington State's done an amazing job. I think Mike Leach has done an amazing job taking a young quarterback, putting him in there and getting the results that they're getting. Last week against Arizona was fabulous for them, to get that win. They're at 5 wins. They're 1 away from getting bowl eligible. I think that's a huge step for a program right now that continues to try to build itself back up under Leach. So I like Stanford in this game. I think right now they're playing, like I said, some of the best football when you talk about it with Kevin Hogan at quarterback. I think defensively they're going to give up some points in this game. I mean, that's going to be a factor, but
you just can't help it.
You just can't help it against that. But I think they'll eventually outlast Washington State and win this game.
I have Stanford picked in this one, and I believe Stanford's the Pac-12 champ down the road too. So we're both agreeing on that one. ESPN Game Day is in Philadelphia on Saturday because Notre Dame is at Temple on Saturday night. When those two teams meet, you just throw out the records because it's.
I don't think at the beginning of the season.
Party time.
I don't think at the beginning of the season anyone would have thought that.
Number 9, Fighting Irish. Number 21, Owls. CJ Procease is averaging 132 yards per game. That would set a Notre Dame record. Temple comes into this game with running back Jahad Thomas, senior linebacker Tyler Matakevich. Those are their 2 studs to watch in this game. Temple has only been ranked 10 times in school history, and 2 of those times have been the last 2 weeks. So this is really a remarkable season for Temple. And I have 2 fun facts in this one. Temple has never beaten a school from the state of Indiana. And October 31st is Notre Dame's best day ever for college football. The Irish are 15-0 when they play on Halloween. It is. They actually said that in the Notre Dame is the best date for Notre Dame out of any date that they play. So will they go 16-0 and give Temple its first loss of the season?
No, I think Notre Dame wins this game. I mean, I know I like what Temple's doing. I like what Matt Rhule's been able to do. I think they're doing it with defense. The defense has been really solid this year. They've been able to stop a lot of high-powered offenses. But this is the way I look at it this way. Notre Dame has right now is one of those teams that no one's talking about that I think can get into the top 4 that can make it to the playoff. Because of the fact that they play a ranked Temple team, they're going to end up playing a Pitt team that could be ranked at that time down the road, and they're going to play Stanford down the road as well. So I think
right now their one loss is to Clemson, who's a world beater.
Who's a world beater. So if Clemson beats Florida State, that just helps us all. So I think right now Notre Dame is in that position right that they know, Brian Kelly knows, we could actually get ourselves in a spot to be there. I think this game could be close to start out with, and I think maybe it'll be one of those second half games where Notre Dame kind of find a ways to pull up. But again, nothing to take away from Temple. Temple having a great season right now. I think Matt Rhule's name will probably come up. If he doesn't get a job after this year, I think his name will come up again next year somewhere for some other position, obviously, as well. And so, again, I think to be a sold-out game, I think this is going to be having game day at Philadelphia, I think this is going to be an amazing atmosphere.
Be the 4th different stadium in Philadelphia that Notre Dame's played in. So I'm full of great facts today, but I think Notre Dame wins this one, and I think Notre Dame, one of the stories not getting a lot of credit is Deshaun Kaiser. Now he's played coming in the backup role, taking over, and he's been able to be efficient in that Notre Dame offense, and that's what's key with Notre Dame. You need to be able to be efficient. You've got the talent at running back. You've got the receivers. You just need to not make mistakes, and so far he's been able to do that for the Irish. I have Notre Dame winning this one also. State games. UCF hits the road to play Cincinnati, the first meeting ever between the 2 schools. A return for UCF interim coach Danny Barrett, who starred at Cincinnati in his college days. Tommy Tuberville, the head coach at Cincinnati, he's made the quarterback job an open battle, but that's what he says. But Gunnar Kiel looks, all in purposes, back and starting this game for Cincinnati. Shaq Washington, their receiver, he's the guy to watch out for in this one. And the only fun fact I have for this one is Cincinnati has alternated wins and losses all year. WL. I don't think they're losing 2 straight. UCF visiting there. When I looked at this game and I was getting ready to do our show, I was thinking, before the season, if you and I would have looked at the schedule, we would have circled this is a key American game. This game right here could go a long way in determining who wins the American this year.
I think at least maybe early on, because I think there's a pride factor here. I think there's, I know we talk about it week in and week out. These players have to play for themselves, they have to play for their school, they have to do all these things. But I think once something happens when the coach, when we saw it a little bit with USC, when Sarkisian was fired and Clay Helton came in, there's almost kind of like it's like a fresh breath of air in the program. And maybe that's what you can help some of these kids kind of get out there and see what happens. You hope maybe they put the distractions aside and they decide this bonds them together more and they come out there and they play better. I think that's going to happen early on. I just think that talent level-wise right now, I think Cincinnati's a little bit better, and I think Cincinnati pulls away in the second half.
I think Cincy wins this one, but I'm curious to watch this because Danny Barrett recruited Justin Holman to UCF. He's Holman's coach. He was quarterback's coach. He is really going to ask a lot of Holman, and Justin Holman's had a rough year from injury and then struggling since he's been back. Now he's playing for his position guy. I'm curious to see how he does in this game. I think Cincinnati wins, but I agree. I don't think it's as cut and dried blowout as you think.
And let's be honest, for some of these assistant coaches, they're coaching for their job next year. They're coaching for next year. They're thinking to themselves, I got to impress someone else.
And players are playing for next year too, because now you have a coach coming in that doesn't play favorites, so you have to impress them. Miami hits the road with a new coach. They play number 22 Duke on Saturday night at 7 p.m. The Blue Devils quietly 23-4 in their last 27 regular season games. As of right now, Brad Kaya is still going through the school's concussion protocol. His status is in doubt. He did not practice on Tuesday for the Hurricanes. Malik Rozier is planning to start that game. Thomas Sirk is the quarterback for Duke. He is one of 5 QBs among Power 5 schools that leads his team in both rushing and passing yards this season. But this Duke team doesn't get credit for how good they are also on defense. And they have a ball-hawking defense, and they have 20 different players that have a tackle for loss on their stat sheet this season. This isn't my dad's Duke. This is a good Duke football team, and Miami's going in there. Who knows what mental state they're in going into this one with their emotional week of losing their coach and everything that happened there. Not an easy task for Miami.
No, not at all. And as I mentioned before, the UCF, sometimes when a change is made, you get that breath of fresh air that goes through the program. I think this game, if Brad Kaya is 100% in this game, maybe you kind of think, okay, there's a chance they come out there and they play inspired and they do that. And it's nothing against his backup, but again, I just think you're talking about a different level going on here. Going on the road is always tough. We saw that, again, USC going up to Notre Dame. With their coaching change, they weren't able to pull it off, but they played tough. I think Miami plays this game tough. I think Duke pulls it out in the end again because I just think that there's just too much going on around this program to really kind of get to that point.
And I think Duke's just good. I think they're a better team right now.
I think Duke's going to be,
and I think Duke could end up in that ACC title game with something to say against Clemson. Syracuse travels to Tallahassee to play number 17 Florida State, a noon kick on ABC. Seminoles have won the past 7 meetings between the schools. Syracuse won their first ever meeting in 1966. Syracuse is young. They are very young. 17 of its 22 starters last week were underclassmen. 26 underclassmen have at least one start this season. We know about their quarterback issues. Eric Dungy is starting to take over, settle into his role there. He has 3 200-yard passing performances of the year. Really, the key in this one to me is how does Florida State bounce back from just the devastating way that they lost to Georgia Tech. It wasn't like they had dominated the game and one play cost them. They know why they lost the game. It's still a devastating way to lose. Clemson on the horizon, a week away, a noon kick in Tallahassee. It's tough to wake up on college campuses for those 12 o'clock games against Syracuse.
This is an interesting game to me because you mentioned all those factors, but I look at it like this: you should be angry if you're Florida State. You should feel like we should be undefeated. We should go in this game. So there should be a huge chip on their players' shoulders. They should come out with the idea that we want to punish Syracuse just because you happen to be the team we're facing this week. To show people that we're not a bad team. But we talk about trap games with Clemson. This, to me, is a trap game for Florida State, honestly, because this is a chance where if this team comes out flat, if they don't come out and play, they figure their season's over, so to speak, and they're looking ahead to Clemson, again, and not focusing on what's going on, they could somehow get tripped up like they did last week against Georgia Tech. So I want to see them come out. They've got to take advantage in the red zone. They can't settle for field goals. They've got to score points, and I don't know if that's Jimbo Fisher, not being aggressive enough in the red zone. They need to find ways to be aggressive. We've seen what Everett Golson can do when they really give him the opportunities. He wasn't able to do that in that second half. And they've got to get Dalvin Cook. They've got to give him more opportunities. Only 4 touches in the second half is ridiculous, unless he's hurt. He has to touch the ball at least 12, 15 times a half. So they got to give him the ball and kind of let him do what he needs to do and have those big plays. That's what Florida State's really good at, is those big breakout plays that really kind of, it's like a big hit that knocks a team backwards and kind of gets them sputtering. So that's what really Florida State needs to do this week.
One benefit, Syracuse does not play with a triple option offense,
No, not at
so they won't disrupt Florida State. I think Florida State wins this game. I think they finally pick it up, and it's one of those second half runaways with it. Final game, we're picking the number 11 Florida Gators. Play Georgia in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville. They've met in Jacksonville every year since 1933, except 2 years in the mid-'90s. Florida can clinch its first Eastern Division title and SEC game berth since 2009. Just take that in. I mean, that's a long time now. Gators, they're +8 on the season and turnover margin. They rank 15th in the country in sacks per game. Georgia has only given up 8 sacks on the season. Of course, they're missing Nick Chubb. I've been high on Florida. Some people have said I'm high picking Florida. I thought that they would go into LSU and beat the Tigers. You even picked them to beat them. But the things that they didn't do well against LSU were things we thought they would do well. They gave up passing yards to Brandon Harris. They did not put pressure on him. They finished the game with 0 sacks. Now there's pressure on Florida. This is their first game, I think, this year where they're the team that has the pressure. Again, well, I mean, maybe a little bit in Kentucky because Kentucky was trying to break the streak, but Ole Miss game, no pressure on Florida. They could just do, if they lose Ole Miss, no one cares. Maybe a little self-pressure against LSU because, hey, Florida's undefeated. There's something going on here, but LSU is the real deal. But now they're going to play a Georgia team, which people are going to say they should beat. SEC East division title on the line, October 31st. You can clinch the East. The pressure is on the Gators. Let's see how they react in this one.
Now I'm going to throw some stats at you.
Whoa, fun stat time.
Florida is ranked in this game. They were to start the week out. They were 2-point favorites going into this game. The last time they were favored in this game was 2012, and they lost. And the only before that, they weren't favored in this series until 2009, which started a stretch under Urban Meyer. So again, this is one of those series I like to tell people that you never know what's going to happen. Last year, Georgia should have came in and destroyed Florida. They were reeling. Will Muschamp was pretty much out the door. He had boxes in his hand. He was leaving, and yet Florida comes out and destroys the Bulldogs in that game last year. This is one of those series where I think, again, you just never know what's going to happen. And that being said, though, I'm going to pick Florida because I think Florida is going to win this game. I think Trajan Harris is going to find the ways to, after having some time to kind of, really kind of digest what happened against LSU. I think he's going to get a little bit better. They need to get Kelvin Taylor going in that running game as well. And I think right now Georgia's offense is struggling. I mean, Grayson Lambert, who started the season out so well, is really not looking comfortable at all. I think losing Nick Chubb was a huge, was a huge impact on this offense. And I think they're not being able to find that kind of consistency from their running game as well. But I think this game could be close starting out again, and maybe Florida pulls away. Florida likes to come out early and score a lot of points in the first quarter. I look for them to try to do that again and then kind of take the game.
The team that scores those points will probably win this game.
That's a good point.
Probably.
That's probably a good.
I've been behind the Gators.
Was that Vince Lombardi or was that?
That was a Brant Parsons right there. I've been behind the Gators this year when people thought I was crazy. When I picked them to beat Ole Miss, I picked them to beat LSU. I was 1 for 1 on that. But I've been tight this week. I'm going back and forth. If you look at my notes, I don't even have a team pick. So I went to the internet and I looked up some pictures, and that's a bulldog. Isn't that nice and cute, right? Make you want to take it home, feed it. Then I looked up the gator.
You don't want to take that home with you?
Who's winning that fight?
So we're going with mascots? This episode's going to go with mascots?
I'm going with the vicious Florida Gator.
Wow. All right.
Florida Gators to knock off Georgia.
Next week when the Anteaters take on the Wolverines.
Alligator gets a Commodore or a Gamecock. We'll see how that goes. But I think Florida wins this one. I think they play well with the pressure. I think Trajan Harris continues to settle more in his decision-making with the week off to be more settled into the offense. I think he's a difference maker in this one. They win it. Before we say goodbye, one last time, our sponsor today, Purple Rain, the Orlando Sentinel book chronicling Orlando City's inaugural MLS season. It is going to print now. It is on sale. You can order it. It's 160 pages, beautiful colors, colored photos, stories from the first year. You can get it now with a $10 discount off the cover price. Go to orlandosentinel.com/purplerain to reserve your copy. And I gotta go to the internet now and pick out pictures for next week and figure out how I'm gonna base my picks. I think I'll do it out in colors next week. There's the prettiest uniforms.
Hopefully there's no Tigers versus Tigers.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. For Matt Murschel, I'm Brant Parsons. Join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. for College Football Now on OrlandoSentinel.com.